Welcome to Healthy Living. I'm Lori Johnson. Thanks for joining us today. Our topic is preventing breast cancer. My guest is Dr. Susan Wadia-Ells, author of the book Busting Breast Cancer: 5 Simple Steps to Keep Breast Cancer Out of Your Body. Dr. Wadia-Ells, great to see you. Thank you so much for your time and for being here today.
Well, I'm pleased to have been invited. Thank you so much, Lori.
So you were on a 12-year quest to research the causes of breast cancer after you had several friends who were diagnosed with breast cancer, and a good friend died at age 57 from breast cancer.
That's right. And sadly, I have lost 5 more friends since my first friend died, about 15 years ago, and then I've had 5 more die since then from metastatic breast cancer.
I'm so sorry to hear about those losses, and so many of us know of friends and loved ones who have been diagnosed with breast cancer and sadly died from it. And so you, in your research, came up with these 5 steps, as you call them, 5 simple steps to keep breast cancer out of your body. And let's talk about those at length during the program. But real quickly, I'm going to go over them and then we can get into the details. Number 1, practice a healthier lifestyle. Keep vitamin D blood levels at appropriate levels. Avoid using hormone birth control. Avoid radiation mammograms, and cleanse the body and mind. And so you talk about breast cancer as being a metabolic disease. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it basically talks about how cancer cells need to have glucose or sugar in order to survive, but our regular cells need glucose or can switch over to ketones and have that metabolic flexibility. So the idea is to starve the cancer cells of sugar. Am I right there?
That's right. And most cancer cells need some level of glutamine, which is a critical amino acid that our bodies produce and need to stay healthy. So the difficulty now is to not just block the glucose with the ketogenic diet, but to also find ways to non-toxically block the glutamine. And they're doing it, thankfully, with a lot of anti-parasitic, inexpensive, in some cases, repurposed drugs. So that's very exciting news. So people don't have to, when they're diagnosed with breast cancer or really any kind of cancer, they now can totally avoid radiation, avoid toxic levels of chemotherapy, and there are only non-toxic, healthy ways they can use to manage their cancer.
So your first bit of advice, your first step to avoiding breast cancer, and I subscribe to it wholeheartedly, is to practice a healthy lifestyle. And you point out that just being overweight, having body fat itself can sort of lead to breast cancer. Talk about just what fat does. It encourages estrogen, right?
Well, we love estrogen and we love progesterone. We need to have them in balance, in equal amounts. And what's happening is it's very difficult for women to maintain that balance if they're overweight, because if your fat cells, your excess, your adipose tissue, the fat cells, they are producing their little factories of very weak estrogen, and they're operating 24/7. So if you are even 15, 25 pounds overweight, you're producing a ton of excess estrogen every day. And so you're very imbalanced. And that excess estrogen acts like an acid that attacks the mitochondria. And this is really important, Laurie, when the mitochondria can't process oxygen anymore because they've been suffocated by, let's say, too much estrogen coming from your fat cells. If they suffocate, they connect with your nucleus in that cell, and they say, start to duplicate, uncontrollably. Just start making a tumor. And they do, unless your immune system comes in and zaps them. But that's why it's so critical for women to get rid of all of their excess body weight. And in the U.S. today, 1/3 of all American adult women are not just overweight, they're morbidly obese. And then another third are overweight And there's very few of us that are healthy weight, but we all need to get there if we really want to avoid breast cancer. Yeah, very important.
Well, see, this is the problem, though. It's so hard to lose weight, especially with all these delicious foods everywhere we go and everywhere we look. I mean, back in my grandmother's time, I remember my grandma saying it was easy to be a normal weight back in my day because there wasn't any junk food around. We didn't have all this stuff. We didn't have fast food. We didn't have all these sugary products. And, you know, you talk about having a healthy lifestyle and maintaining a healthy weight, and then also talking about how cancer cells love sugar, they love glucose. So talk about you know, the importance of a ketogenic lifestyle, because if you starve the cancer cells from sugar, if you don't give sugar to cancer cells or any cells, then our other cells can adapt and use ketones as fuels. So you really do promote the ketogenic diet. So talk about what that really is.
Right. And I think the ketogenic diet is a very important lifestyle or diet for all of us, even those of us of healthy weight, to follow for, let's say, a month every 12 months, because it takes away your hunger. It's fascinating, and you never get it back again like you used to. But even more important, Lori, than going on a keto diet is getting rid of sugar addiction. The United States government has made sure that most Americans are addicted to sugar. And because we have to understand that the U.S. government health agencies are the same as the fast food industry, as the pharmaceutical industry. It's a revolving door. The people who head up the National Cancer Institute or the National Institutes of Health go back into the food industry, go back into the current lucrative cancer industry. And so we really need to stop trusting the United States government. That's a horrible thing to say, but they are the ones that have made the U.S. population obese. And if you read my book in chapter 2, I talk about how the food pyramid, it's created to create fat people. And that those people in the history who have tried to make that food pyramid relevant and get rid of the carbohydrates, which means the sugar, and that they always get kicked out of their jobs. And instead, that food pyramid remains. And that food pyramid will get everybody obese just like it has. So
Absolutely.
I think
don't go by the food pyramid. Absolutely. All right. We're going to take a break and be right back with Dr. Susan Wadia-Ells. The book is called Busting Breast Cancer: 5 Simple Steps to Keep Breast Cancer Out of Your Body. Stay with us. Welcome back to Healthy Living. We're talking with Dr. Susan Wadia-Ells, author of the book Busting Breast Cancer: 5 Simple Steps to Keep Breast Cancer Out of Your Body. And right before the break, we were talking about how we really shouldn't follow the food pyramid. We should really try to get sugar, especially, out of our diet. And of course, sugar is in not just desserts, but in other things too, like things that don't seem sweet, like bread and yogurt. How do we break the sugar addiction? Because it just does get in your mind, and it just lights up that pleasure center, and you have the cravings. And we know that experiments that have been done on animals like mice and rats, they like sugar as much, if not more, than illicit drugs like cocaine and heroin. How do we break the sugar habit?
I think the best way I can say it is, if any of us have ever smoked and we were able to stop ourselves smoking. So whatever an individual used to stop smoking, I remember when I stopped smoking back in the 70s, I kept making cups of tea and I would find half cups of tea, made tea around my house all the time. And it also took my best friend, my mentor, my substitute father, my boss, who then got inoperable cancer, double carcinoma of the lungs at age 48. And so when he died, a lot of us stopped smoking. It really helped us, but it was still difficult to do.
Yeah.
Each person has got to, have enough caring about themselves to figure out what's going to work for them to stop the sugar. Many people go to stevia and sugar substitutes. that's probably certainly better than sugar. And maybe that's the first step many people should take, and then try and wean yourself. I mean, stevia apparently is a natural uh, product plant, whereas all of the sucrose, and I don't even know the names of them, but those things that are the artificial sugars, the chemicals, they will really cause havoc in your body, digestive havoc, the people with leaky
Absolutely.
gut and all.
Oh,
So
right.
I
Yeah.
think the deal is to just figure out what works for you in terms of, but to know that sugar is your worst enemy.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know that it doesn't just lead to breast cancer, but that all cancer cells love sugar. They thrive on it. And so to try to starve cancer cells of their main fuel, which is glucose, is a great idea. A lot easier said than done. Let's move on to your second recommendation, which is about vitamin D levels. Actually, vitamin D3 levels. You say people need to make sure to have a proper amount of vitamin D. And interestingly, women who live in the north have higher rates of breast cancer than women who live in the south, who get more sun. Talk about the importance of vitamin D, but also vitamin D3. A lot of people might think, what's the difference?
Right. We're going to focus only on vitamin D3 because that's what is, I call it our internal internet system. And when we have high amounts of vitamin D3 circulating in our blood, that means that when one of our cells starts to suffocate from too much sugar, or suffocate from stress, or suffocate from lots of other causes, that if our vitamin D3 blood level or our internal internet system is strong enough, man, that cell that's suffocating will send out a signal saying, help, help. I need to either die or get fixed. And the vitamin and your immune system will then listen, because the internet system's strong enough. Your immune system will then come screaming in to help suffocate that dying cell. We call that apoptosis, is what biologists call it. I'm not a biologist, by the way. I am a political economist who has a PhD in women's studies. So my forte is research, and I haven't had a television in 50 to 55 years, and I think because of that, I have been able to write this book.
Okay.
Because I haven't had the brainwashing that 99.9% of the American public has had.
Wow, I
And
admire
so
you.
I was able, with a blank brain, to begin to do the research and understand, I think, that breast cancer is a completely unnecessary disease, unnecessary epidemic.
When you were talking about vitamin D and the importance of getting vitamin D, obviously we get it from the sun. But what do you feel? How do you feel about vitamin D supplements? Because we know that there's little to no regulation of them, and sometimes they aren't what they say they are on the label.
Well, I think the important thing is for people to always know what their vitamin D3 blood level is. And there's an esteemed biologist out of University of California, San Diego, Cedric Garland, who says he's never seen a woman diagnosed with breast cancer who has a D3 blood level over 60.
Right.
If you keep your D3 blood level above 60, it's called nanograms per milliliter, and it's a blood test, and you need to ask your doctor to have it once or twice a year. If it's not over 60, you need to either do indoor tanning as well as outdoor tanning. Indoor tanning if you live in the north. If you live in the south, outdoor tanning. And then also you want to be taking D3 supplements, and not 1,000 IUs, but probably, depending on how low your D3 level is. It's kind of like when someone says, well, how much D3 should I take? It's like them saying, well, how many gallons of gasoline will I need to get to San Francisco?
Right.
And of course, the next question is, well, where are you starting out from? And if they say, well, I'm going to start out from Los Angeles, well, you're going to need fewer gallons of gasoline to get to San Francisco than if you're starting out from Boston. So a person needs to know their D3 blood level. Is it at 9? Is it at 15? Is it at 100? And once you know that, then you can say, okay, now I can do outdoor tanning, I can do indoor tanning, I can take significant amounts of D3. And the recommendation is to take the D3 with K2 and with some magnesium in order to activate the D3 and maximize its impact.
We're going to take another break and be right back with Dr. Susan Wadia-Ells. The book is called Busting Breast Cancer. Welcome back to Healthy Living. We're talking with Dr. Susan Wadia-Ells. The book is called Busting Breast Cancer, and we're talking about ways to prevent getting breast cancer. 1 in 8 women are diagnosed with breast cancer, and one of your tips is to avoid the hormone type of birth control. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Today, everyone is concerned about how many younger women, premenopausal women, women under 50, who are developing breast cancer. And what I have realized is what's going on is OBGYNs are pushing progestin or hormone-based birth control drugs and hormone-based, progestin-based IUDs on teenagers as well as younger women to help them deal with all sorts of menstrual issues. And no one is recognizing that we have finally figured out that progestin, the hormone in these hormonal contraceptives, not only can initiate breast cancer, but it can accelerate breast cancer. And if people want to go to my new Substack station, you can Google Susan Wadia-Ells Substack or Busting Breast Cancer Substack. I'm talking a lot about that, as does chapter 3 in my book, that in 2010, a blue ribbon panel finally figured out exactly how progestin not only creates breast cancer, but it accelerates breast cancer. And so that means when a premenopausal woman is using, a teen or a young woman is using one of these hormonal contraceptives, or older women are prescribed these combination menopausal relief drugs, which also include that progestin. And we know from past studies that that increases their risk of breast cancer of the older women by 24%. There's 10 times more progestin in the hormonal drugs and the hormonal IUDs. So no wonder younger women, they're being told, prescribed by their OBGYNs to use these progestin drugs. And the sad thing is the people who discovered how the progestin is causing breast cancer have refused to make their study public. And I quote it, and I quote the press release when it was first released before the study was deep sixed. I show people the article in Nature magazine, which is it's a academic journal, and it came out in October 2010. And women need to read chapter 3 in my book. They need to go to the Substack, Susan Wadia-Ells Substack, and learn about the dangers of progestin and how it's causing turbo cancer in younger women right now.
All right. And we're going to take one final break and be right back with Dr. Wadia-Ells. The book is called Busting Breast Cancer. Stay with us. And we are continuing our discussion with Dr. Susan Wadia-Ells. The book is called Busting Breast Cancer: Ways to Prevent Being Diagnosed with the Disease. And one of the main ones is avoiding mammograms. You say that the radiation type of mammogram, not the ultrasound. That's the kind I get, or the ultrasound. And then also you're a big advocate of breast self-examination when you feel a lump your own self, but not so much the radiation, right?
Well, mammograms are being used to create today's breast cancer epidemic because they are overdiagnosing. Having a mammogram is the only way they can tell a woman she has abnormal cells called DCIS, or they call it now stage 0 breast cancer. So they use mammograms to terrify tens of thousands of women in the U.S. every year in order to get them to start paying for taking breast cancer treatments when they don't need it. And the stage 1 breast cancer, again, can only be found by a mammogram. It's a teeny pea size, probably dormant tumor that's been there for years, will be there in their grave. And yet the mammograms are able to overdiagnose, is what we call it, tens of thousands of women a year, terrify them into taking the horrible toxic radiation, chemotherapy, surgery, anything to get money out of your insurance company. Everyone should have a thermogram every year. It's a heat-based procedure that will show if you have any active any active cancer cells in your body. And at that point, as you said, it's important to have an ultrasound. Most insurance companies won't pay for the ultrasound unless you first have a mammogram. It's a disgusting situation going on now for women, and they need to find concierge ultrasound clinics, because they don't need a doctor's prescription. They can pay $200, have an ultrasound if they find
those ultrasounds. Yeah, they're good. All right. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but we want to thank you, Dr. Susan Wadia-Ells, for your time and your research and your expertise. Once again, the book is called Busting Breast Cancer: 5 Simple Steps to Keep Breast Cancer Out of Your Body. Thank you so much for being with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
And thanks to you, our viewers, for tuning in to this edition of Healthy Living. I'm Lori Johnson, and we'll see you again next week. Bye now.